So grateful for you to be joining us on what I think is so many fundraisers' favorite topic, events. Love them or hate them. They're part of the fabric of fundraising. And so I am Kim Hales. I am a senior consultant with Sukup. I have been doing fundraising work across different sectors for the last 20 something years. And I'm excited to talk about this topic today. Let Mandy introduce herself real quick.
Consultant, also a consultant with Sukup. I have been in fundraising and planning or fundraising actively at fundraising events for nearly 20 years. And my journey with events are that when I was a newbie to this field, I thought, oh, they're so fun. And I was really focused on the decor and was always really busy with the logistics. And then as I moved more into some major gift fundraising, I started to groan, events are a hard way to raise money. And since the pandemic, I think my thoughts on this have really began to evolve and change. And so I've come to reframe them in my mind and with my team as a really important opportunity to get a lot of your supporters together in one place and to kind of efficiently get a lot of people face to face with you while you're also potentially raising funds. So we're going to kind of explain our new thought process around events. But to start things off, we thought we would love to hear just in one word from you what your biggest challenge is with events. So we're going to have a poll appear on screen. And please enter your response and we'll kind of take the group's temperature on what you find most challenging with events.
Yes. And as Mandy said, one of my first real roles in fundraising was at a university, and the AVP there had a very hard and fast rule of no events, that the ROI isn't there and they're not valuable. We were in $1 billion campaign, and that was just, I started my career with that mindset. And as I've moved into other roles and other organizations, again, to Mandy's point, they're necessary. And if you can understand what your reasoning, what your goals, what you're really trying to achieve with an event, who your target audience is, all of those things, they can be absolutely valuable. Yes, expectations I see in there. I think that's a really big one. I think it's probably supposed to be friend raising versus fundraising. RSVP. In today's world, no one wants to RSVP on the time frame, and everyone comes in late. Saturation is a really good one. In your community, are you competing against 12 other events that week or that month, or what does the calendar look like, and how much are you paying attention to that? Budgeting, attendance, all really great and very valuable challenges that we have in here. We're going to keep this up for a few more minutes. I know there's about 33 people and only 12 responses in there. So feel free to keep posting. I don't know if you can see that and the slide, but I can't. So I'm going to close it. So I think we can go on to the next slide. But events are challenging, right? There are lots of different kinds. And I think when we talk about that, or, a board member says, oh, we should do an event, right? Well, let's think about the different kinds that there are and what the benefits of each of those can be, right? So we have social events where you're talking about big donor gatherings. If you have you're at a school or somewhere that has alumni doing something for that group, right? You're talking about maybe a little bit smaller social gatherings. It's for, a board of trustees. If you're having your annual meeting, are you going to add a social event onto that? Do you have something with your program beneficiaries? So really more of a smaller group gathering that really has a social focus with like-minded individuals. Thinking meetings, right? We think about events as this big, it has to be this huge gala fundraiser, but that's not true, right? Anytime where you're gathering people for a purpose, that's an event. So thinking about, how do you do your strategic planning? How do you have an annual meeting for your organization where you're inviting the public to it? Do you do presentations, talks, symposiums, panel discussions about your mission topic? Are you bringing people in for thinking/educational purposes? And what does that look like? And then we move into fundraising events. The next slide. All right. And this is what everyone's thinking about when they think of events. But even within those, what are the differences between, a formal event, a gala, an auction, something that's, high stakes, high value, but a lot of work. And then more informal ones where it's, maybe more family friendly, maybe more community based. You're talking about, a run, a walk, some kind of tournament, something where, your base is much broader. They can be just as much work as a gala or something like that, but you have, a lower point of entry from a financial capacity and a broader base of support. And then your online fundraisers, I think COVID showed us that we can do some things online that have some value. I think, people are a little bit clamoring a little bit more for in person now, but there's a space for those online fundraisers. The way that you decide what kind of event you're going to what you really want is to think about the outcomes and what you're trying to achieve, in addition to what the true cost of the event is. And I think that's one of the things that is really important to talk about. Most organizations aren't thinking about their staff time when they look at an ROI of an event. So you think about, okay, here's the budget, here's how much it costs to put on the event, and here's how much it raised. So, we net $100,000. Well, let's say you have 10 staff members spending 6 months working on this event. You've likely raised nothing because that time could have been spent doing other things to raise money. Not saying that that's not valuable, but you've really got to look at how much staff time and resources you're putting towards this to really determine kind of that true ROI. One of the things I don't think I said, we are using the Q&A and not the chat. So please put questions. If you have questions while we're talking, please put them in there. We're going to try to answer them if they're appropriate to what section we're talking about, but we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So please use those as well. And then again, when you're looking at why or how to use an event, what's your board going to do? How are they going to engage? And that's the most important thing. Because if you think you're going to be able to do a really huge gala and your board is not on board, they're not going to commit to helping with sponsorships, bringing people into the event. It's going to be a really big struggle. So what does their networking connection look like? And maybe their networking connection is more of a community-based event where they're going to be able to get people involved in something different than they would if it were a big gala. So really evaluating, again, what your goals are, but who you have engaged and ready to help with the event, and what does your staff time look like? And are you giving up the ability to do other things for something that may not have that ROI?
So well put, Kim. So we're going to go on to assuming that you have done the work to determine there's all these different types of events. We're going to do one, and we're going to make it a big fundraising event. So we've got a poll on screen asking you what's the most important cultivation work you will do when you are planning that fundraising event. Is it before the event, at the event, after the event, or D, all of the above? I'd love to hear your thoughts there. All right, I'm trying to see. Oh, 7 responses, 10 responses. And we've got a variety. We have some people saying before, some people saying after. Interestingly, we've had less response on at the event. But by far, now we've had about a third of everybody respond. I'm starting to see this trend, and I would agree with this sentiment that it's really all of the above. It's important that we recognize the value. If you're going to devote the staff time, potentially some resources for expenses, volunteer management to execute one of these large fundraising events. You want it to be as impactful as possible. And so your work in cultivating can be happening before, during, and after. And you don't want to wait until the doors open that night or your runners are right there at the starting line. So I wanted to talk about the pros of marketing your event as a cultivation tool. The minute you announce an event, even at the internal level, you're already doing some really important things from a cultivation standpoint. If there is a volunteer that you've really been wanting to get engaged because of their giving capacity, or they're a board member who's really looking for what their role is, once you have that event established, bringing them on board as a volunteer is a really easy and tangible way to deepen their level of engagement with the organization. When you move beyond internal cultivation and looking at who you're going to get to volunteer, you also can get people to sign up who have never done anything for your organization before, but maybe they really like planning parties, or maybe they're really devoted to planning fun runs. But this is a great kind of low threshold entrance point to identify new volunteers who may be your future board members. As you make your event public, either because you're procuring items or you're soliciting sponsors, or tickets are in sale, you are marketing your event, but it's also kind of a passive way to just ask for overall support for your organization. This gives some people in your network the opportunity to say, oh, I can't make that event, but I did want to send a gift your way. As you're telling the story of this upcoming event, you are continuing to tell the story of your organization and the work that it does. So this is a great time bound way to tell stories about your organization, perhaps featuring a program recipient or beneficiary. If you're a healthcare nonprofit, maybe this is when you highlight a healthcare professional that's going to be at the event. You announce who special guests and presenters are going to be. And you also have a powerful way for your board members to start identifying new supporters. So if your board member commits to putting together a table or a team, really emphasize with them that you're not looking for the tried and true people already supporting an organization. This is a chance for them to bring new supporters to you, to see your nonprofit in action. So identifying new folks who aren't even given to your organization and making sure those are their guests that help them fill their table or their team it's a doable ask of a board member. It gives them something really tangible to work towards. And once they get the right people in the room or coming to this event, that can really generate a great new loyal donor. This also might be, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, just to hop in on that real quick, Mandy. And I know that you've had this issue too. board members think they're being really great and supportive when they say, oh, I'm going to buy a table, but I can't come. I'm going to donate it back to you. Same thing with sponsors, right? I'm sure everyone, I would be surprised if not every single person in this webinar has had that happen to them with an event. And I think one of the things we need to talk about, especially with our board members, it's harder with sponsors, but especially with our board members, is it's not only about the money in the sponsorship or buying a table. Part of an event is to grow your donor base and supporters and understanding. And if they can't do that, I mean, certainly still take their table and understand that. But I think this discussion about it prior to the invitations going out and prior to that has to be one of the real reasons of this is for you all to bring in new people. That's one of your, as a board member, you're an ambassador, and that's really one of your roles is to introduce people. And this is a great way. So if you really can't be there and you want to support, give the table to a different table captain, another person who then could fill that table. Donate it back is not as helpful as you think it is. Nicely say that, because I think they genuinely do think that's wonderful. We could invite other people, but we really want you to identify those people that are going to be able to come. So.
Very, very good point, Kim. I can't tell you the number of times this has happened. And you're right, it does happen with sponsors too. But with board members, I think we have started to be a lot more explicit about our expectations. Like really think about your friends who love to bid if it's an auction. Think about your friends who you haven't seen in a while and you could do a night out that have some deep pockets, and really trying to get them to be more strategic about who they ask, and making that just as important as the purchase of the table or the sponsorship of the team. Events do give you a really important opportunity, speaking of sponsors, to attract corporate support when someone wouldn't respond to your annual fund appeal. But events, because they have some built-in marketing elements, this continues to be an important way to attract corporate support. And so this is why they still remain on so many nonprofits' calendars, despite some of the challenges that we all encounter with them. As you are putting together your list of who has RSVP'd versus who has not, it's also really important to think about what are you, who are you missing, and is this just your opportunity to make a phone call? The event gives you a time-bound reason to touch base with people. So really think about who's missing, who hasn't RSVP'd, and make sure that you do that personal outreach. When you do this, you also want to reach out to some specific major donors you've identified, and see if there's anything that they identify that you could prepare ahead of time to make the event a little more personal, a little more special for them. I had an opportunity to speak with a major donor who was also involved with a corporate sponsor. So I needed to talk to this person for two reasons. He was coming to the event and he said, he had been to the event before, and he said, yes, I'm coming. You know, I've noted that you all never have Bud Light Lime on the bar. And you're not going to believe this, but that's my favorite beverage. And I'd really love it if you all would have it at the event. And we had that conversation prior to the event, and it was not hard to change our list with the catering company and add that. And then I got to say to him, hey, guess what? I got Bud Light Lime for you here at the event. And because I remembered that, and it became a joke between us for years after, but just that little phone call to say, hey, I see you're coming, excited to see you, anything I can do, allowed me to make the event more enjoyable for him. Another way that you can personalize somebody's attendance at the event is putting a note in their race packet if they're really important to the organization and there's something that you want to say to them. If it's at a formal event where there's assigned seating, putting something at their table, but all these pre-conversations and really thinking about who is going to be in the room before those doors open allow you to elevate the event in a way that can make it really meaningful for those attending. And as you make these calls, as people's plans change, maybe they thought they were coming, now they're not. Maybe they can't come and they're sad about it. Just keep in mind that even an invitation and a follow-up on that invitation that results in a no RSVP can still result in a gift. Maybe because a lot of auctions are online now, maybe they still go on and they buy some raffle tickets, or they're bidding from wherever they are. Maybe they feel really bad because that the event is just really a difficult day for them, but they make a point to make that when they're going to make their annual gift. So all of this outreach before the event really allows you to be engaging with some of your most important donors. All right, so now you've done some of this pre-work, you've marketed the event, you're telling your story, you've made the event special for some of your major donors, and now we are at the event. Kim, tell them how to maximize this as an opportunity.
I'm going to put this in here, I think real quick. How many people, and I'm doing this on the fly, so I'm trying to talk and put this in here at the same time. How many people get to the event and actually are able to talk to people while you're there? So how many of you are not running around like a crazy person at the actual event? Talking to the caterer, talking to whomever.
I'm not seeing a lot of people able to claim that is true for them.
Yeah,
Kim.
I'm not. I was posting it in here. So anyone in that answer, tell me, oh yeah, I'm all, chill at the event and I get to talk to donors. So I think this is the biggest mistake we make as fundraisers. Now, there may be many of you on this call who are more on the logistical side of it, and that's absolutely fine. There is the need for that. But in most cases, your director of development, your kind of lead frontline fundraiser, maybe not the chief development officer or the executive director, but especially if you're in a small shop, you're running around dealing with things like the caterer, the seating chart, the registration table, all of that. And you are not able to be the one to talk to donors at the event. And I think that is the hugest missed opportunity, right? When you look back at the poll, so many people said, oh, before and after is really important, right? You think, okay, they're at the event, they're hearing the message, they're doing all of the things they need to do, and I don't need to talk to them. But it's a really big missed opportunity, especially with your current donors and sponsors. And I see a few things in here. We assign donors to leadership team members with a clear message. That's fantastic. A great way to utilize that. I still hold very firm that the director of development or someone in that role really needs to be alleviated from logistical duties the night of the event to be able to manage the donors there. You're getting a really great opportunity to introduce yourself to new people, to have your board members or your supporters who have invited other people to introduce you, and asking them to do that at the event is completely appropriate and a really great use of your time and theirs. So if you can, it's really important to think about who could do all of those other things. Can there be a lead who's really the troubleshooter of anything from a logistical perspective that happens, so that you have that time to really be talking to people? Because you could say, oh, it was so nice to meet you. You have a little notebook or your phone or whatever way you have to take notes that evening to remind you, oh, Joe Smith introduced me to Jill Smith. I need to follow up on Monday, and be taking all of that down so that you have a real reason to connect with people and know that you actually had a conversation with them and that you can follow up with them on something specific. Again, it gives you a really time-bound way to talk to them, to be able to, give a little bit of a synopsis if you're having an auction, or what the reason for your paddle raise is going to be able to get people talking about those things with you during the event, during the cocktail hour, really having that opportunity to talk to people is, I think, the biggest missed opportunity that we as fundraisers generally have at an event. And then again, being able to have that clear follow-up afterwards is so important. And I think, we do events and we're exhausted. They are so much work. And so we want to do an event on a Saturday and take a Monday off. I think that's also one of the biggest mistakes we do too, because that's when everything is fresh and that's when it's really important to talk to your donors and to follow up with them and to do that. And so, when you're thinking about how you plan the event, what your staffing looks like, really thinking about what your goals and outcomes are, right? Is it really just at the event, we're gonna, we have this long-standing event, we raise $500,000 in the auction. And that's all that our focus is. Let's get that 500,000 in the auction. And that's a, transactional thing with people. They're buying something and that's how we raise our money. Maybe you have a different outlook, but events should really be used as this tool to cultivate supporters. And that is in any of those events we talked about earlier, no matter what size or style. The real purpose of them is that cultivation tool and getting people to understand who you are and what your mission is. And so if you can have that in your mindset for any of your planning and execution, and remembering that at the end of the day, this is a relationship-based, people first role, and you've got to be able to be talking to those people.
I could not agree more, Kim. In this reframing that we talked about earlier, where I used to really groan about events, and if you weren't there at the beginning of the call, I didn't like them. I tried to get out of doing them. And I have found in the years since COVID, people kind of, they discovered new efficiencies in their schedule, and it's harder and harder to get people in one-on-one face-to-face meetings these days, even for board members. But so it would take a board member forever to set up 9 face-to-face lunches. But if they can bring 9 of those people to this event, then I can see 9 of them at once. So that's like, I can meet them for the first time, for example, because we really want our board members inviting these new people. But the other thing it allows us to do, so we can be really efficient. We can see a lot of our supporters, new and old, at once, but also we can introduce them to each other. So like if you have a seated event, which not all events will be, but if there are seating assignments, I mean, be really strategic and think about, I want these 2 tables next to each other. And then during the event, I'm going to go over and I'm finally going to introduce these 2 people who I have been thinking need to meet. Connecting your base of philanthropic support, like loyal and longtime donors with new emerging donors, is really important. And these events give you a great opportunity to do that. I also want to really emphasize what Kim said about the follow-ups. As I said, it can be really hard to get people to agree to a one-on-one face-to-face meeting, and it can take several touch points to do that. The event and seeing them in the event in no way replaces that. That still should be done. You should be able to have an individual, private one-on-one conversation with a major donor. But if I see them at the event, I want to use that to set up the follow-up I'm going to do next week. And I'm going to sit. So I'm going to check in. Are you having a great time? Is there anything I can do for you at this event? And then, hey, I wanted to talk to you about something. Can I call you next week? And so I've already said I'm going to call them. They might say, oh, I'm out of town next week, but let's do it the week after. But I've laid the framework. I'm going to be calling you. And then, of course, in my notes app on my phone or in your like pen and paper list that you're keeping, you write down, I did say I was going to call them, and so I will, and put that on your follow-ups list. Kim, do you have anything else you wanted to add about at the event before we start talking about the follow-ups list and all the stuff you do afterward?
No, really, again,
Okay.
just that sort of idea that if you can try to focus your time and go in, look at your list of attendees. If you have wealth screening tools, use them on the attendee list. Put that, I said no, but now I'm going to say one more thing. Put that together. to whomever said they had, people assigned to their leadership team, that's a great thing, depending on, again, the size and scope of your organization. Can you create a list of the top 10 or 20 people that are going to be there? Give that to your CEO, your board chair, little pictures of those people's faces on there so they can see. Obviously, if you have name tags at your event, great. Lots of galas, that's not necessarily appropriate or what people want to do. So having some of those photos in a piece of paper so that people know when they see them who they're trying to make sure they connect with. So if you can, understand who your attendees are going to be and really elevate some of those up to understand who you want your leadership or yourself to be able to meet with, at least as an introduction the evening of the event.
And I think this is, if you're having an event, sometimes a corporate sponsor will send attendees, and this might be the only time that you will interact with them for the whole year. They are sent as a representative. So making sure that you recognize, oh, you're from this bank, we're so glad you're here. And then maybe checking in with them as they leave, because you really want them to leave that night feeling like, what a great night this was. I'm really glad that my company is sponsoring this organization and sponsoring this and sent me to this event, and going back and raving about it back at the office so that you can renew that corporate support for the following year. Okay, so you've done a good job at the event circulating. You have determined some follow-up actions you want to take the next week. Post-event, as Kim said, people are exhausted, people are drained, people want to pay the invoices, total the cash receipts. But I think it's just really important for people to remember that your cultivation process is continuing there. So you're going to revisit your follow-up list from the event. You're going to make those calls. There are people who wanted to come to your event who could not come. This is a great time to also do follow-up calls with them and let them know how it went. Of course, you're not going to be able to get everyone via phone. And so you're also wanting to tell segmented story of the event and how it went. So often we get these kind of general purpose emails and they'll say, thanks for coming. And Kim pointed out, she gets this and she didn't go. She was just an online bidder, right? So anyway, you can segment it to recognize this is a person who attended and this is a person who could not attend, but maybe there's an auction item still open, or always be restating your case for support. We raised this much money, but we still need you. There is still need. That's an important message for people to hear who could not attend. Thank. Oh, go ahead, Kim.
I was just going to point out one thing that I really love to do in some of those follow-ups. When we say how much we raised, it's great, but I don't know if you're a organization that $100,000 is 50% of your budget or 0.5% of your budget. So saying something like, with the money raised, we are able to do this, but we still need to do this, because sometimes that dollar amount is nebulous, right? We don't know exactly what that means. And I think this, outside of events, in everything that you're talking about, the dollar amount, it's important to understand because you want people to give at a certain level, but really understanding what you can do with that is important. So I think, putting that in some of yours, as opposed to just like, we raised our goal of $100,000. What does that really mean? How is that moving your mission forward? So really talking about what that messaging is.
That's so true, Kim. Finding the impact of what the event raised is so important, and restating the need. I'm glad you jumped in with that. As you're segmenting your groups, also, one of the things I always try to do very quickly is, if you did have some kind of auction component, look at what a new supporter or new attendee did. Sometimes you have somebody who comes to an event as a guest of one of your board members who did what you asked, or maybe as a representative of a corporate partner, and they were really generous. They were a big bidder. for example, or they bought a bunch of raffle tickets. This is a great opportunity to call them and thank them. So you really want to look at who was really active at the event and do the personal outreach there. But for everyone else, you want to get some kind of general communication out. And in that communication, of course, you are going to thank again the volunteers who helped organize it. This is when you start to recruit the volunteers for the very next cycle. This is also when, if this is going to be a recurring event, you should go ahead and give people the date for next year. So they couldn't make it this year, but put it on your calendar for next year. Or they came and they thought, what a great night, what a great cause. I hope my company sends me to that again next year. They already have it on their calendar. And potentially they join your email list and they start following you and they see other calls to action that you'll issue throughout the year beyond the event. You just want to keep this restating your case for support, thanking and recognizing people, and just keep it as a cultivation thing. One way that you can do this is as you are talking to your volunteers, while it is fresh in that week post-event, how can we improve on this for next year? Same thing with that big bidder or a new donor. Hey, I know this was your first time coming. Tell me what you thought. Would you come back? What could we do that would get you to come back? And then, of course, the people who couldn't come, this is a great, hey, I'm sorry you couldn't make it. Can we have lunch soon? So really thinking through who your personal contacts are going to be and all the great follow-up you can do to continue cultivating people well after the event has ended. All right. I think now we're ready for some key takeaways and also your questions.
Yeah. So again, everything we talked about really comes down to understanding your goals. And obviously, every organization's goals are to raise money to move their mission forward, right? When you talk about development. But when you think about an event, and I joke all the time that when I retire, I'm going to write a book and it says all of the things that board members say, oh, you should have a golf scramble. Or have you ever talked about insert the name of your city's largest company here, right? There are lots of things, and board members and volunteers are very well intentioned. But are we really thinking through the different types of events and what our goals are? Do we have a really vast donor base at a low level? And are we trying to engage them in a way that's meaningful for them? Do we have a donor base of mostly major donors whose expectations are a certain level of event? And that's what we're doing. Do we want to gain? Are we really trying to gain a lot of new supporters? And in what way? Are we looking to gain new volunteers and new, recurring donor supporters? So understanding what your goals are is really important to try to determine what kind of event is going to work best. Not necessarily about what could raise the most money, but also what's going to accomplish the things that you really need to accomplish. And then looking at what the expectations, back to the word cloud earlier, I think that's one of the things that's really interesting to think through is the expectations, and having that clear with your executive director, CEO, board, because again, what you raise in the room that night is not all of it. It's not the entire point of the event. And do you credit having new people and new conversations and what comes from that as being a part of, not the overall fundraising total, but if your goal is to get new people engaged, then it doesn't necessarily matter what they gave that night. It's about what you're doing with them moving forward. So how do you set those expectations and think about the metrics that you're talking about as key performance indicators for the event beyond just those dollars? And how are you utilizing it to engage people? How are you taking it from a transactional event where people are coming and buying something to, an auction item or a table or a drink or whatever it is, to really having a meaningful connection to your organization? And that takes forethought, it takes work, and it takes follow-up. So how are you utilizing all of that? And then again, how do you best use your time? And it's a challenge. I'm not saying here anything's easy. I think I once tried to calculate, how many chairs and tables I've put out over my career or moved or, all of that. And it's a lot. Fundraisers and development officers are tasked with doing a lot of work. But if you can really be mindful of what you're going to try to do at the event and saving your time to be able to cultivate those relationships and talk to donors, it's really, really important and going to be better for the organization in the long term.
Can I just
Maybe
say,
if there's anything else.
well, since I've reframed events in my mind and seeing the relational aspect of what we're doing, I have found they're still stressful. There's still logistics in the back of my mind, but I find them so much more enjoyable. And I don't feel as drained. I am able to walk away from the night and be like, I saw 15 people I've really needed to see. And I've got 15 calls I'm going to make next week because I saw them tonight. And that is really energizing for me, ever since I've started to regard these things in a different way.
One last thing, and I say this, it's not in our the things that we've put in here to talk about, but I do want to just make sure, because I think I've recently been to events and or been working with clients or organizations where they're not making a direct ask at the event itself. And I just want to say, and I think probably everyone in here, understands this and knows, but if you don't directly ask people, even if you just say, oh, there's a QR code on your table, people assume someone else is going to do it, or there isn't the motivation to do it. So I know sometimes we think, oh, we just want people to have fun. We want them to get engaged. But if you don't make an ask, they will not give. And so that being a part of almost any event is really important.
Here, here.
I think we'd love to hear anyone's questions that you have. Please put them, you can put them in the Q&A.
Yes, we have about, we have 10 or 15 minutes in the allotted time. So please throw questions in there. You also have, if you have your phone, you can pull it out and use this QR code to share feedback about today's webinar.
And I'll just say again, hope that people have some questions. We love to answer them. But, Suga Strategic Solutions offers these webinars every month on different topics. I should know what next month's topic is, but I will say that in just a minute. I'll look that up. But again, have monthly webinars. We have a newsletter with all kinds of resources in it for people to have some information on different topics. And we offer a full range of services. So if you have an event that you want just some consultation on, we're happy to talk that through. If there are other needs from a development perspective that you guys have, again, consultations are free. We are happy to, talk to you and help move things forward with whatever challenges that you're having. We have a full team of consultants with expertise in different areas for different needs. And as Mandy said, her and I are both here in Louisville. The company's based in Naples, Florida, but we have clients across the country and I think even in Canada. So I know we have worked with clients in Canada, so we're happy to, talk to anyone about what you or your organizations may need.
And we actually have a question here, Kim, from Bob. It says, for an organization with a multi-person development team, what role could a consultant like you provide?
If it's related to, and I wonder, Rob, if you want to shoot this in there, is it related to an event or just in general? Because I think there are things that we can provide based on what your challenges are. So if you have a multi-person team, but one of your biggest challenges is getting your board engaged, we can do, board training, governance work, and helping them understand kind of what their role is. If your biggest challenge is identifying new foundations from a grants perspective. So it really depends on what the challenge is. I mean, obviously you're here for events. So I think one of the things that that we can do is really help put a structure into place for those events and help you understand, again, where maybe to prioritize your time, how to set the budget to be most effective, and where your team and the board or other leadership team members can plug in to make the most of that event. So it really, we can do a lot of things depending on what your, the biggest challenges you're trying to solve are. I
Yeah,
can't see
Bob
the
said,
questions, Mandy. So if he responded to that and said what area, I'm happy to.
yeah, he said either a role of like helping within a specific event, or more importantly, the overall development growth. So we have helped organizations with specific events, gearing up for specific events. I have done impact coaching with a newer development officer, where actually the idea for this webinar started to come in my mind because the details and the logistics were really consuming that staff person's time. And I was saying, oh, this is a great time to make follow-up calls. This is a great time to be telling the organization story. Like, let's look through your attendee list. And so trying to kind of guide staff and reframing how they do this work as a cultivation tool. And we were doing some coaching on that. But then we have had consultants on site for events, even I think last month. Kim. So doing everything from graphic support for the graphics and the marketing, to database management, choosing their auction software. I mean, there's a lot of different roles that you've had with this, Kim.
Yes. Again, I like to say, unless it's your, accounting practices, we can help with almost anything. We try to stay away from, the accounting, but from a nonprofit perspective. So yes, from in events, it could be everything from helping you create a logo for a new event, through marketing it, determining if you should have new software for an auction, how to define what your paddle raise is going to be if you're going to have them, how to create matching opportunities ahead of the event so you're going into that paddle raise with some good halfway through your goal amount, and putting all of that together for an event. But in terms of overall fundraising strategy, what we often do with organizations is come in and do an organizational assessment or a fundraising assessment to see where you are. Are you utilizing the tools you already have well, from your CRM to your marketing and social media, and really looking at your trajectory over the last 3 years, where your donors are segmented in terms of kind of annual fund and major gifts, and how many, and what your retention rate is and growth rate. And so looking at all that and then helping build out a growth plan from there. So there are all kinds of opportunities, again, based on what your needs are. So you go to our website right there, soupcupstrategicsolutions.com. There is a consultation link, and you can just get a consultation. It's completely free. We'll talk to you about all of the things we can offer, look at what your, again, challenges are, and see where we can plug in to help. I did see another question on what are your recommendations for kickoff events for nonprofits just starting up. Mandy?
Well, so I love this question. I think I would want to go back to the kind of our initial discussion of different event types, because the staff lift and the time left when you don't already have an existing base of support to do a fundraising event is going to be immense. This is a great time to ask board members to do gatherings in their homes, or if you have a headquarters where people could actually observe your programs, doing some visioning sessions for the nonprofit. People are always happy to be invited to weigh in with their expertise, for example, to do maybe a fundraising event that's not formal, that is not going to require the expenses that a formal event will have. So really carefully consider all the different types of events you can do that will allow people to get engaged, but they're not going to have maybe a ticket price or even a fundraising goal. Those would be where I would go first for a nonprofit just starting up.
I would agree. I think it's, again, you're a brand new nonprofit and you say, we want to have a big gala with 200 people. You're setting yourself up for a lot of work and probably a little success. But you want to figure out ways that you can engage people and what's going to be, what is your mission and how can you connect people to it in an organic way. Would be my biggest recommendation, because again, if you're new and just starting, you want people to know who you are, and so it's likely less to be about the raising money piece and more likely to be about building community. So how do you build up that community of supporters who care about your mission?
I think you can also, this is an area where you could play smartly with some online fundraising options. So you'll have to check gaming regulations in your state, but you could do a pretty simple online auction with just 1 or 2 items where people could buy raffles, but you don't have the expense of inviting a lot of folks to a place where there's a per head cost. So you could also look into that as kind of a stopgap between doing casual free events and then transitioning more into fundraising events. That might be an interesting midway thing to look at.
Mm-hmm. And who are your board members? And are they willing? I think some of the underutilized things there are, do you have a board member who's willing to have 20 or 30 people in their home? Cover the cost of it, even if it's just, some wine and some appetizers, where you can tell people about what you're doing, and then they can become, you'll have more connections and you can build that up. So I think there are ways to do things that don't cost a lot and are giving you some exposure to some new supporters. I did just get the next month's webinar is about grants, outcomes, and measurements. So if you or anyone on your team does write grants and wants to talk about how best to use that, how you can develop your outcomes and measurements for stronger proposals, which is so important, that will be next month's webinar. I know
Again, I'm going to go back 1 slide. If
Yeah.
you have feedback about today's webinar, now that we've gotten to answer some questions and hear from some more folks, please pull up the QR code and help us find out what future content you might like from Sukup Strategic Solutions as we plan future webinars. We hope you'll join us next month and for our webinars to follow.
All right, I guess last call for any questions. Well, we appreciate it. We know everyone's really busy and summer's finally here and started. So we really appreciate everyone joining us today. We hope that you got some valuable information. If you have, you'll get an email after this with the information we shared. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to either one of myself or Mandy or Sukup directly, because we're happy to answer questions or do any follow-up for you and with you, and we appreciate your time.